Hi. Oh, hang on a minute, is it recording? Okay. Hi, it's Helen Claire Gould here, and I'm doing a half hour or so live stream. We'll start with the poem, and if you've seen my broadcasts before, you'll know that I like to start dark and end up slightly lighter. Well, I don't know how that's going to work out this time. Anyway, here we go with Scenes Against the Sky. The window frame above me refracts into my eyes a mirage of the sun-warmed whiteness of a small Moroccan town. My eyes conjure up before me the twisted graphic shapes of the 3 tall pines on a lonely hill, outlined against midsummer blue, with the hissing of the sea in the distance and tussocky grass ruffled by wind and sparse between rocks and sand. The black sky rumbles overhead with atomic debris and the song of the burning cities which they've sung for 30 years or more. Shrunken before my time, I crouch here, scavenging among my memories for a single soft breath of summer as it was before. Thank you so much. Okay, that was a little bit dramatic, wasn't it? I shall continue with a reading from The Invisible Dance. Now, this is not finished. I've got about 7 chapters out of roughly 4 times that much written. So it's a sneak peek, really. Okay, chapter 1. The window was open and sunshine poured in like syrup. Noreen shut her eyes against the brightness, but the rectangle of the window frame had left an afterburn image behind her lids. Reluctantly, she opened them again. The limbo of sleep had been featureless. The landscape of day was unfamiliar. While her eyes accustomed themselves to working properly again, Noreen studied the window frame for many minutes. When this failed to provide any clues as to where she was, she decided it was time to move and rolled over. "Oh, you're awake then?" The question came from a man who was seated in a nearby armchair, reading a book, so she couldn't see his face at first. When he lowered the book, memory rolled in like thunderclouds. The row with Simon when he'd made a pass at her, following months of less serious sexual harassment, applying for other jobs, getting the off-world posting and leaving Earth, being sick in the shuttle as they'd come in to land. The stewardess had helped her off when everyone else had left the shuttle. "Let whoever meets you deal with your luggage," she suggested. "You're not in a fit state to collect or carry anything." "I know." As Noreen stepped off the ramp with her cabin bag slung over one shoulder, the evening sunlight stabbed at her eyes and the world threatened to somersault. She staggered onto the moving walkway and dumped her bag in front of her, afraid she'd drop it. The spaceport whirled around her. Fortunately, there was a moving handrail to cling to. She was the only person left on the walkway. She realised then that she was completely alone, on a strange planet, and ill. What have I done, leaving Earth? What if my new employers don't send anyone to meet me after all? The walkway carried her off the landing pad and into a building. The huge arrival suite was empty. Despite that, it was stuffy inside it. Her nausea returned and her head spun. She lifted a foot to step off the walkway. The end was approaching, and as yet there was no sign of anyone meeting her. She managed to pick up her handbag, wishing she could just lie down and sleep. Her foot made contact with the ground, but the room swung and went black, and the next minute she tumbled to the floor. "Easy," someone said. It was as if he'd materialised out of nowhere. A hand under her elbow guided her away from the walkway. She tried to open her eyes to see who was there, but even the indoor lighting was too much. Niarine Campbell? It was a moment before she recognised her own name. The owner of the voice had separated both her fore and surnames into 2 distinct syllables. Yes? Road Plan sent me to collect you. When you didn't show up with the other passengers, I asked about you. They said you were following more slowly. Sorry, she mumbled. Ill on the shuttle. Need to sleep. Feel faint. You can sleep soon, the voice promised. It had a nasal inflection. Sit here. Have you luggage? She nodded gratefully. Big red bag. I'll get it. Wait. Noreen dozed while the man was gone, only waking when he touched her arm lightly. Is this it? She squinted at him. He was pointing at her luggage. She managed to focus for long enough to be almost sure the bag was hers. It didn't occur to her to look at the label. Think so. Good. We must leave now. I have a car outside. Can you walk if I carry your things? Noreen managed a nod. She had to concentrate just to stay upright. Whatever kind of a bug she'd got was making her feel very ill indeed. The stranger was a reddish blur in front of her. She followed him through immigration, though he had to search in her cabin bag for her travel documents. Surprisingly, the immigration officers were human, at least they spoke very colloquial American English. She forgot about that as the stranger moved on. When they reached the car, he helped her into the front seat, stowed her bags away, and swung into the driver's seat. With a word, one she didn't recognise, he darkened the windows, set the car in motion, and sat back to regard her. You should start to feel a bit better when we reach the hotel. Don't worry about anything. I'll make sure you get safely on site. With her head aching a little less in the dimmer light inside the car, Noreen was able to take stock of her rescuer. Her initial impression was correct. He was an almost uniform red-brown wherever his skin was not covered by clothing, and even that was a similar colour. So was his hair, and though cropped short on top, at the sides and back it had been allowed to grow long. It reminded her of an animal pelt. His eyes were brownish, and there was something different about them. They seemed almost luminous in the gloom. Thanks. I hope I don't give this to anyone, Noreen said, locking her gaze with his. Then she realised what was different about his eyes. There was an inner ring of a different colour, bluish or perhaps green, just inside the iris. He wasn't human. With that, she passed out. He sat regarding her now with the same grave expression on his face. You're not from Road Plan, she said, afraid she'd been kidnapped. I am. At least I don't work for them permanently, but they asked me to pick you up from the spaceport. Oh, she thought for a moment, then said, May I know your name? It's Bai Guar Chi Orm, he obliged. You can call me Bai. Right, thank you. Noreen felt totally bemused. She must have been worse than she'd thought to let an alien drive off with her. But it's an Earth-based company. Bai grinned. So you assumed they'd send a human? The grin became a smile, and not altogether a pleasant one. A human wouldn't be able to pass the blockade. Only a Chiorm can do that. Noreen considered that. When she realised she could make no more sense of it than she already had, she asked, Do you bring all the new staff in, then? Mostly. His glance became speculative, but never a woman before. Noreen became self-conscious then, realising that the bedclothes felt slightly rough against her skin. You undressed me. Not completely, he said mildly. What's the problem? You don't want an alien touching your pretty brown skin? It's not that. Noreen had only a moment to think that perhaps his people's sexual behaviour was very different from human behaviour. After the way Simon had treated her, she was sensitised against sexual interaction. I don't want a male of any description touching me. No? No. She wondered whether to elaborate or not and decided against it. He might take that for an invitation, and if she was going to have to spend some time with him, that would cause big problems, particularly if her safety depended on it. Well, he said, I'm glad racial prejudice isn't the cause, even if sexual prejudice is. Do you want a drink? Noreen considered. Her stomach was completely empty, yet it felt more comfortable that way. But she'd have to eat and drink sometime. Perhaps I should try now. I can always lay off it, if I start feeling bad again. She compromised. I'd prefer fruit juice. Oh, okay, I'll have that. And food? Noreen thought hard again. Only one thing will do. Toast, she said. Is it possible to get toast here? It certainly is here in Langland City, though not in the interior. I have human food bread. He got up, and she saw that he was only slightly taller than she was. Stay there, I'll make you some. Noreen closed her eyes. At least they didn't hurt like they had the other night. She allowed herself to drift in the red mist that lay behind her eyelids. Here. He raised a hand to stifle a yawn. Noreen realised then how tired he looked. When did you sleep last? She asked. Bi gave a one-shouldered shrug. I dozed while you were sleeping. You're crazy. You're my responsibility, he pointed out. I needed to make sure you were okay and keep you safe. Why don't you go and lie down now? He shook his head. I've got some things to do first. She sat up as Bi handed her a plate on which lay 2 crisp triangles of toast with a scraping of butter on them. Its golden colour reminded her of sunlight. The smell was enticing. For the first time since her illness, she felt hungry. Then she remembered she was only wearing her underclothes and pulled the duvet up about her. It's okay, Bi assured her, putting a glass of juice on the bedside table. I'm going to check the car. Don't let anyone in while I'm gone, whatever you do. I'll have my coffee when I get back, and I'll knock 3 times so you know it's me. That sounded a bit cloak and dagger, she thought. Yet he seemed perfectly ordinary in many ways, and she remembered that he'd looked after her for several days. She watched him go through a doorway she hadn't noticed before, probably a communicating door into his room. It was a few minutes before she heard the door close quietly. By that time she'd rediscovered her appetite, finished the toast, and had lifted the glass to her lips. She didn't feel particularly like getting up, but she decided that now was a good time to teeth won't work tonight. To reclaim her clothes in privacy. Swinging her feet over the side of the bed, she stood up. Although she didn't feel sick anymore, her balance wasn't perfect. She looked around for her clothes. There was no sign of them. Then she saw the wardrobe at the other end of the room. That would be the place to look. Bi seems a tidy type. Not that I can expect to tell with a man who's not human. In the wardrobe there was no sign of the clothes she'd worn on the shuttle, but her favourite red blouse was hung up, and a pair of navy jeans, so she pulled them on. She'd just finished fastening the buttons when she heard Bi's key bleeping at the lock to his room. She opened the connecting door and looked through into his room. As she thought, it was tidy. The bed didn't look to have been slept in. There was a knock, repeated twice, and then a click, and the door opened, just as if someone was entering the room from the corridor, but Noreen couldn't see anybody. Bi? She asked, stepping back as she remembered his warning. Yes, it's okay, it's me. The door closed and she heard the bleep again. Only then did his shape shimmer into view, the rich redness of his colouring appearing as a blur before his body could be defined. What? How did you do that? I didn't realise you'd get up while I was gone. He exhaled sharply. It's a Cheorm secret. That's why you were sent to fetch me, she guessed. Correct. Thank you so much for listening to that. There may be more if people like it. And I'm just going to have a quick swig of this. Cheers, everybody. And how are we doing on time? Oh, that was quite a short piece, actually. Okay. So I'm going to finish with another poem, and this is called Sky Among the Mud. I wrote it about 50 years ago, believe it or not, but at that time I lived in Shepperton, and they started building the M3, and this cut the village in half. So I lived at the Littleton end, which was quite cut off from most of the businesses there, the train station, High Street, our doctor's surgery, any evening activities we might have wanted to do, and most of the shops and restaurants, even schools and some family friends. And I realised that this poem has some relevance for perhaps things like the projected HS2 train line up in the north of England, where it looks like they're going to do something similar. So this is Sky Among the Mud. They are building a motorway, and there is nothing but vast expanses of mud and mud and mud. They are building a motorway. It's a governmental luxury, something the country can't afford. But they persist in building it, in saying that the sky among the mud makes it all right. They think it will be a motorist's paradise. The fools! How can it be when there's no metal for cars to be made of, no petrol, no oil for cars to run on, no money to buy cars with? But the sky among the mud makes it all right for them. They are building a motorway, and there is nothing but huge plains of mud. They are building a motorway. The mud is hard-baked and dead from 3 centuries of frost and sun. They kept saying that the sky among the mud made it all right. It didn't. And as I walk, I can see the gangs of men heaving and struggling for the last days of the old capitalist empire. Then, sent home, jobless at the last, home to poverty and squalor and overcrowding. It's all peaceful now. The sun shines down, and there's sky reflected in the muddy pools. Thank you very much. I've just remembered that one day when I was on my way home from school, that I was crossing this expanse of mud with puddles dotted quite liberally around it, 'cause it had been raining, in my slingbacks, and they were peep-toe slingbacks, so they had an opening at either end. And one of the guys who was working there said to me, "Oh, that's okay. You know, you broad Irish accent, which I can't really do, but he said you can. Don't worry about where you put your feet, because if the water goes in at one end, it'll come out the other end," and that did very much amuse me. So it was quite a fun thing that I remember about it. Right, well, we finished a little bit early, but the other thing I'd like to say is that if you posted birthday wishes for me the other day, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate them. And, you know, it's maybe that I haven't got back to you personally yet, but I have posted a message on my timeline, which is, you know, a general message. But hopefully I'll be able to get back and just have a little conversation with everybody through the week. I'm sort of working very hard on my next book now, so quite sort of busy, but I will try to do that over the next few days. All right, that's great. Colin and I have a live stream to practice tomorrow on Facebook. That will be streamed to the finger on the pulse if we can get it to work, and hopefully it will. I know Colin's worked very hard to deal with the technical aspects of streaming. So I hope to catch up with some of you at the weekend for Fiction Fix. It's on at 4 o'clock for probably just a little bit over an hour. We've got 6 readers for you, including ourselves, of course. And we hope to see you there. And that will be streamed to the Finger on the Pulse, if you remember. If not, I think it comes onto my timeline. And if you miss it totally, don't worry, because I will be posting it on Monday morning to my YouTube channel, which is Helen Claire Gould. All right, lovely. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you soon. And I'm just going to finish now. Bye, everybody. See you again next month.